You feel that pain that shoots down your leg like an electric shock and does not let you sleep, walk, or live in peace. That pain that appears when you least expect it, that steals your nights, that prevents you from getting up from the chair without making a grimace, that has taken away the freedom to move as you want. If the answer is yes, I want you to know something very important before continuing. You are not alone, and that pain you feel is not a life sentence. Millions of people over 50 years old live with sciatic pain as if it were an inevitable sentence, as if it were the price that has to be paid for the years lived. They told them it was age. They told them it was wear and tear. They told them they had to learn to live with it. And you, who have been enduring it for months or perhaps years, have probably already started to believe it. Today I come to tell you that this is a lie, a comfortable lie for some, but a lie nonetheless. Sciatic pain is not an inevitable consequence of aging. It is a signal that your body has been sending for a long time and that very few have explained to you with honesty. Your sciatic nerve, the longest and thickest nerve in the entire human body, does not hurt for no reason. It hurts because there is something inside it that is pressing on it, irritating it, inflaming it. And that inflammation in the majority of cases has an origin that no one has mentioned to you in the consultation. An origin that is directly related to what you put on your plate every day. Hello, I am Dr. John Lupin, and for years I have been studying the relationship between diet, chronic inflammation, and the nervous system. I have seen patients who came to my consultation with incapacitating sciatic pain, with magnetic resonances full of terrifying terms, with bags full of medications they had been taking for years without feeling any real improvement. And when I asked them what they had changed in their diet, the answer was always the same: nothing. No one had told them that the key was there. In this video, I am going to share with you something that conventional medicine rarely prescribes, not because it does not work, but because it does not fit into the standard model of the 15-minute consultation. I am going to talk to you about 3 specific foods backed by serious scientific research that have the capacity to reduce inflammation of the sciatic nerve from the inside. They are not expensive supplements. They are not experimental treatments. They are foods, real foods that have existed for centuries and that your own body knows how to use. But before getting to them, I need you to understand why the anti-inflammatory medications you may already be taking are not enough. I am not saying they are useless. In a moment of acute crisis, they can be a valid tool to manage the pain, but there is a huge difference between putting out the flames of a fire and eliminating the source that is feeding it. Anti-inflammatories do the first. They put out the fire temporarily, and when the effect passes, the fire returns many times with more force because the cause that lights it remains intact, remains active, continues to feed on what you eat without you knowing it. That source, that silent fuel that keeps the sciatic nerve in a state of permanent alarm, is chronic systemic inflammation. And in the next few minutes, I am going to explain to you exactly what it is, what causes it, and above all, how 3 foods that you probably already know can help your body fight it in a way that no medication can replicate in a sustained way. I ask you to stay until the end of this video, not out of obligation, but because the information that is coming is what can make the difference between continuing to endure that pain and starting to feel real relief. And I will tell you something in advance. The 3rd food we are going to see will surely surprise you. It is something so common, so accessible, that you probably have it in your kitchen right now. And yet, the majority of people with sciatic pain never use it in the correct way. Your body has a capacity for recovery that modern medicine often underestimates. It does not matter how many years you have had this pain. It does not matter how many treatments you have tried without success. Biology does not lie. When you give your body the correct tools, it knows exactly what to do with them. And those tools today come in the form of food. To understand why it hurts, you first need to understand what is hurting. The sciatic nerve is not a small, delicate nerve hidden in some corner of the body. It is the largest nerve that exists in the human being. It originates in the lower part of the spine, crosses the buttocks, descends down the back of the thigh, reaches the knee, and from there divides into branches that reach the feet. It is literally the nervous axis of the lower half of your body. When that nerve becomes irritated, when it becomes inflamed, when something presses on it or attacks it, the pain message it sends is proportional to its size. Intense, deep, sometimes unbearable. Imagine for a moment a thick electrical cable of the type that powers an entire house. Now imagine that that cable is surrounded by small flames that burn slowly without ever going out. They do not cut it, they do not destroy it suddenly, but they heat it, damage it little by little, and make every signal that passes through it arrive distorted, amplified, turned into pain. That is exactly what happens when the sciatic nerve is subjected to chronic inflammation. The flames are not visible on an X-ray. Sometimes they do not even appear clearly on an MRI, but they are there, active, silent, and their origin many times is not in the spine, it is in the blood. Here is where conventional medicine usually stops, looking only at one part of the problem. They look for the herniated disc, they look for the pinching, they look for lumbar canal stenosis, and when they find them, they point to them as the culprits. But there is something they rarely ask. Why is that disc so deteriorated? Why are those tissues around the nerve so irritated? Why does the body of this particular person have so little capacity for recovery? The answer in the majority of cases is one single word: inflammation, chronic systemic inflammation, an internal state of alarm that the body maintains constantly, sustained, and that over time ends up affecting everything, including the longest nerve you have. Inflammation in itself is not the enemy. It is a natural, necessary response designed to protect you. When you hit yourself, when you have an infection, when there is damage in some tissue, your immune system activates an inflammatory response to heal. That is health functioning correctly. The problem begins when that response stays on without a real reason, when the body lives in a state of permanent emergency that does not correspond to any concrete threat. Scientists call that low-grade inflammation, and it is one of the most studied factors in the origin of chronic diseases, including neuropathic pains such as sciatica. What keeps that state of inflammation turned on? There are several factors such as sustained stress, lack of restorative sleep, sedentarism, but one of the most powerful and at the same time the most modifiable is diet. Specifically, certain foods that the majority of people consume daily have the capacity to raise in the blood the levels of molecules called pro-inflammatory cytokines, in particular interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These names sound complicated, but their function is simple to understand. They are chemical messengers that tell the body that there is a threat, that it should keep the guard up, that it should remain inflamed. And when you feed them with your diet every day, the sciatic nerve receives that message continuously. What are those foods that trigger these alarm signals? The first is refined sugar, present not only in sweets, but in white bread, in cookies, in packaged juices, in dozens of products that seem innocent. The second are processed vegetable oils, such as corn oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, which contain an excess of omega-6 that unbalances the inflammatory balance of the organism. The third are refined white flours, which the body processes almost identically to pure sugar, generating glucose spikes that activate inflammatory cascades with surprising speed. I am not saying that you have to eliminate everything at once, nor that living well is synonymous with eating without pleasure. What science does demonstrate is that reducing the consumption of these three elements has a direct and measurable effect on blood inflammation markers, and that change can begin to be felt in the body in a matter of weeks, not years. Now, eliminating the fuel from the fire is half the work. The other half is giving the body the ingredients it needs to put out the flames that already exist, to actively reduce that inflammation that has been accumulating for months or years around the sciatic nerve. And that is exactly where the three foods I come to talk to you about today come in. Three foods that are not medications, but that act on the same mechanisms as the most powerful anti-inflammatories without the side effects that the latter generate with prolonged use. Let us look at each one of them. The first food I want to present to you today is one that you probably know from childhood, that you may have used once for stomach discomfort or for a cold, but whose power over the inflamed nervous system is something that science has only begun to document seriously in recent decades. I am talking about fresh ginger, not the ginger powder that comes in a spice jar that has been in the pantry for years. Fresh ginger with its live root, with its active compounds intact. Why ginger? Because it contains a family of molecules called gingerols and chogols that act on the same biological pathways as non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, the same ones that are prescribed for sciatic pain, but without the damage that those medications generate in the stomach, in the kidney, and in the cardiovascular system with prolonged use. A study published by researchers at the University of Miami demonstrated that the continuous consumption of ginger extract produced a significant reduction in pain and stiffness in patients with chronic inflammatory conditions comparable in effectiveness to moderate doses of ibuprofen. The difference is that ginger does not erode the gastric mucosa nor raise blood pressure. The most effective way to consume it for sciatic pain is in an infusion with the fresh root. Take a piece the size of your thumb, peel it, cut it into thin slices, and let it steep in hot water, not boiling, for 10 minutes. You can drink it on an empty stomach in the morning and a second cup in the afternoon. Consistency here is more important than the amount. Ginger does not act like a pill that gives results in 2 hours. It acts as a process of retraining the inflammatory system, and its benefits accumulate over time. The second food is perhaps the most studied of the three in direct relation to neuropathic pain, and yet the most underutilized because the majority of people do not know the crucial difference between taking it correctly or taking it in a way that does nothing. I'm talking about turmeric, specifically curcumin, the intense yellow pigment that gives turmeric its characteristic color, and that is its main active compound. Curcumin has a documented capacity to inhibit nuclear factor kappa B, a molecular switch that activates the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, exactly those same molecules we talked about in the previous block. When that switch is turned off, the body reduces its production of inflammatory alarm signals, and the tissue around the sciatic nerve begins to receive fewer pain stimuli. Studies published in neurology journals have shown that curcumin can reduce central pain sensitization. That is, the nervous system stops being so amplified, so reactive, so ready to interpret every signal as a threat. But here is the detail that no one tells you, and that changes everything. Consumed alone, curcumin has extremely low bioavailability. That means your body absorbs less than 5% of what you ingest. The 95% passes through the digestive system without being used. The solution is so simple that it seems impossible that it makes such a big difference. Black pepper. A compound in black pepper called piperine increases the absorption of curcumin by up to 2,000%, according to pharmacokinetic studies published in specialized scientific journals. 2,000% just by adding a pinch of freshly ground black pepper to your turmeric preparation. You can incorporate it by mixing half a teaspoon of turmeric with a generous pinch of black pepper in a cup of warm plant milk, in a broth, or simply in hot water with a drizzle of olive oil, which also improves its absorption because it is fat soluble. Once a day is enough to start noticing its effects on inflammation in a period of 3 to 4 weeks of continuous use. The third food is the one I promised would surprise you, and I know that for many of you, it will not be a surprise due to lack of knowledge, but because you never imagined that something so everyday could have that power. I am talking about wild salmon, or, failing that, canned sardines. Two extraordinary sources of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, are the two types of omega-3 that the human body can use directly to reduce neurological inflammation. EPA and DHA do not act simply as passive anti-inflammatories. They are precursors of molecules called resolvins and protectins, whose specific function is to actively terminate inflammatory processes. It is not just that they stop inflammation, it is that they give the body the tools to resolve it, to close the alarm cycle and begin the tissue recovery phase. For a sciatic nerve that has been in a state of sustained inflammation for months, this is not a minor detail, it is exactly what it needs to begin to heal. Now, there is a difference that you cannot ignore. Farm salmon, the one sold in most supermarkets at a low price, has a very different nutritional profile from wild salmon. Farm salmon is fed feeds that contain a much higher proportion of omega-6, which significantly reduces its effective omega-3 content. Wild salmon, or Alaska salmon as an accessible reference, has concentrations of EPA and DHA between 2 and 3 times higher. If the price or availability of wild salmon is an obstacle, whole sardines and olive oil are an equally powerful, more economical alternative with the additional advantage that they are consumed with their soft bones, providing bioavailable calcium that also benefits spinal health. Consuming any of these two sources 3 times a week is enough to begin to modify the inflammatory profile of your body in a period of 4 to 6 weeks. It is not magic, it is biochemistry applied to what you put on your table. I want you for a moment to stop thinking about the pain and think about what the pain has taken from you. Think about the mornings you woke up afraid to get out of bed. Think about the walks you stopped taking, about the activities you abandoned one by one, about the times you preferred to stay seated even though you wanted to move because your body warned you that the price of moving was too high. Think about all that and then, listen to me well, you do not have to continue living like this. Not because it is easy to change it, but because the path to change it already exists. It is already documented, and it is much closer to you than you imagine. Throughout this video, we have talked about 3 concrete foods backed by real science that act on the biological mechanisms that keep the sciatic nerve in a state of chronic inflammation. Fresh ginger with its gingerols that stop the inflammatory pathways without damaging the stomach. Turmeric with black pepper that turns off the molecular switch that keeps the body in a state of permanent alarm, and wild salmon or sardines that give the organism the tools to actively resolve inflammation and begin to repair the nervous tissue from the inside. None of these 3 foods is a miracle, but the 3 together, used with consistency, are a nutritional strategy with more scientific backing than many of the treatments you have probably already tried. Now, I want to be honest with you because I believe you deserve it. Real changes in chronic inflammation do not happen overnight. The body does not work like a switch that turns off and on. It works more like a river that changes course slowly, stone by stone, day after day, until a moment arrives when the water no longer flows where it used to. With these 3 foods, the majority of people who incorporate them consistently begin to notice a real difference between the 2nd and the 4th week. Not a total disappearance of the pain suddenly, but something perhaps more valuable. A reduction in intensity, greater freedom of movement in the mornings, nights with fewer interruptions, days in which the pain is no longer the first thing you think about when you wake up. That is the body responding. That is biology doing its job when you give it the correct resources. So that this is concrete and does not remain only as information, I want to give you a simple starting point for this week. I am not asking you to change your entire diet at once. I am asking you to start with 3 small and sustainable steps in the morning. Before breakfast, prepare your fresh ginger infusion in hot water and drink it calmly, like a ritual, not as an obligation. At lunch or dinner, add some preparation, a mixture of turmeric with black pepper. It can be in a broth, in rice, in vegetables sautéed with olive oil, and 2 or 3 times a week incorporate wild salmon or sardines as the main source of protein in one of your meals. That is all you need to start. 3 changes, 3 weeks of consistency, and then observe what your own body tells you, because in the end, that is the most important thing I want you to take away from this video. Not a list of ingredients, but a different way of understanding your relationship with your body. For a long time, perhaps, they taught you to see the body as something that breaks with age and that needs to be repaired from the outside with pills, with injections, with procedures. And there are moments when those tools are necessary and valuable, but the human body is not a passive machine that receives repairs. It is a living, intelligent system with a biological memory of health that never disappears completely, no matter how old you are or how long you have had that pain. When you give the body the correct nutrients, when you reduce the fuel that feeds the inflammation and provide it with the compounds it needs to resolve that state of chronic alarm, you are doing something profound. You are reminding your organism what its natural state is. Not pain, not inflammation, health, movement, the freedom to live without every step being a negotiation with suffering. There are people who, after weeks of incorporating these changes, write to me saying that they went back to walking in the park, that they slept a full night without waking up, that they were able to sit down to play with their grandchildren without having to change position every 5 minutes. Those are not big medical headlines. They are moments of life recovered, and that for me is the best evidence that exists. If this video gave you something valuable today, I ask you to tell me in the comments. Tell me which of these 3 foods you are going to start incorporating first, or if you already use any of them and how it has gone. Those comments not only help me understand what information is most useful to you, but they can also be helpful for other people who are going through exactly the same thing as you and who need to know that there is a different path from the one they offered you until now. I am Dr. John Lupin, and I will see you in the next video.